Commander Ryan Hale stood at the reinforced observation window of Nexus Station, his gaze drifting over the panoramic view of drifting starships and swirling cosmic dust, his mind steeled for the negotiation that loomed before him. The station, a formidable stronghold of human ingenuity, clung to the edge of neutral space, an outpost designed to foster peace and open dialogue among the many species that roamed the galaxy. Hale, a veteran of countless diplomatic missions, felt a quiet anticipation that settled in his chest like the hush before a cosmic storm. He tried to steady his thoughts, measuring each breath, preparing to meet the merry delegation that had arrived only hours ago. From across the docking bay, Princess Seraya's vessel gleamed with opulence. It was shaped like an elongated teardrop, carved with swirling patterns that glimmered in the corridor's lights. The Imeri were renowned for their grace, their delicate physical features, and above all, for the rumored prowess of their royal line, especially in matters of persuasion. Princess Seraya, heir to the Imeri throne, was said to exude hypnotic pheromones that could bend the will of any species. Such a talent had ensured decades of Imeri dominance in political engagements. Entire star systems had succumbed to the mesmerizing aura that she projected with each measured breath, or so rumors claimed. Yet, for reasons no scientist could fully explain, humans appeared immune to the Imeri's potent biological advantage. That immunity was so crucial that the Planetary Council had selected Commander Hale, whose track record of unshakable resolve proved the perfect match to lead negotiations. On paper, it seemed like a mere practical choice. Send in the diplomat who could resist mind control. But in truth, no one knew how Princess Seraya would react when confronted with the one species in the galaxy that her mesmerizing presence could not claim. Hale took one final moment to ground himself before proceeding to the docking bay's entrance. The corridor was lined with steel walls buffed to a subdued sheen, the floor a polished walkway reflecting the overhead lights. The tension in the air hovered like dust motes, drifting between cautious security officers who waited in respectful silence at their stations. Each of them held an unwavering gaze, watchful for any sign of danger. But beneath it all, there flickered a current of curiosity. For the arrival of the Imeri princess was no small event. As the heavy doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, Hale stepped forward. Before him stood a small entourage of Imeri advisors, their forms tall and slender, their garments shimmering with the colors of dusk, deep purples, and midnight blues. At their forefront was Princess Seraya, wearing a flowing silken robe that caught the light in iridescent ripples. Her skin, pale as starlight, seemed adorned with subtle patterns like delicate fractal tattoos that spiraled around her shoulders and down her arms. Most striking were her eyes, a haunting shade of indigo that glimmered with ancient secrets and quiet power. She lifted her chin, regarding Hale with an aloof expression. The room seemed to tremble around her, as if her mere presence evoked an invisible current. When she spoke, her voice was soft, melodious, resonant with subtle vibrations that made the hairs on the back of Hale's neck stand on end. "Commander Ryan Hale, I presume," she said, her mouth curving into a faint smile. "I have heard much about you." He bowed slightly in acknowledgement. "Your Highness, welcome to Nexus Station. We've prepared a reception area where we can begin our discussions whenever you feel comfortable." A flicker of surprise crossed her features. Perhaps she expected her pheromones to prompt immediate devotion, or at least a trembling deference. Yet Hale stood calm, not entranced, merely polite. In that moment, a quiet tension passed between them, the direct confrontation of her power against his innate resistance. She blinked once, her gaze narrowing, but he felt no internal shift, just the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat and the unwavering sense of self that anchored him. "I appreciate the courtesy," Seraya said, her melodic tone layered with curiosity. "But let us proceed at once. Time is of the essence." With that, she swept forward, her entourage forming a regal procession behind her. Hale gestured for them to follow him through the corridor into the more formal halls of Nexus Station. Guards stood at attention, yet none dared speak, enthralled by the presence of the Imeri, though spared from its full effect by their training and the slightest protective measures. The corridor itself was adorned with an array of living plants housed in glass cases, a gift from the Earth's botanical reserves, emphasizing the station's commitment to life and exploration. They entered the grand atrium, a central chamber large enough to hold entire delegations. Overhead, a transparent dome revealed the endless expanse of stars. A circular table stood near the center, flanked by chairs upholstered in black synthetic leather. The table was polished to a mirror-like finish, reflecting the starlit patterns above. Diplomatic staff hovered at the edges, ready to take notes and record the talks. Seraya sat regally, her advisors forming a semicircle behind her. Hale took his seat opposite, accompanied by a small team of Earth's diplomatic experts. The air was thick with charged anticipation, punctuated by the faint hum of starship engines. Lights glimmered off the polished surfaces, and each occupant of the table wore an expression of silent apprehension. "Commander," Seraya began, folding her hands in front of her. "Before we discuss the trade and peace treaties, I must address something of significance. My father, King Eridan of the Imeri, has expressed grave concern over humanity's expansion into sectors once reserved by ancient agreement to the Imeri Dominion. The worlds of Arandon, Halira, and Nessalia, each with strategic resources that the Imeri have used for centuries, are now claimed by your settlers. Such movements strain the trust between our peoples." Hale offered a measured nod. "I understand your father's concerns, Princess. However, from the human perspective, those worlds had been uninhabited when our explorers arrived. Since the ancient treaties were neither recognized nor properly recorded by our explorers, some oversight might have occurred. It's our intention to negotiate a solution that respects the Imeri's claims while acknowledging the reality of the settlers who have lived there, in some cases for generations." Her gaze sharpened. A luminous quality emanated from her eyes, an otherworldly magnetism that might have sent lesser delegates trembling. Yet, as her instincts drove these subtle manipulations forward, she found no hold on Hale. His posture remained upright, but unyielding. His expression, while polite, did not soften into adoration or surrender. "It seems you speak from both strength and sincerity," she said softly. "I find it curious." "It is our tradition, Your Highness," he replied evenly, "to approach such matters with honesty." There was a careful pause. Her advisors exchanged glances, perhaps expecting Seraya to apply more direct forms of persuasion. But she merely nodded, as though acknowledging a new, unspoken dimension to their discussion. Within the next hour, they delved into the intricacies of border definitions, resource allocation, and potential joint exploration efforts. Hale's staff presented star charts, data from planetary surveys, and proposals for cooperative mining. Meanwhile, Seraya's advisors enumerated the Imeri's ancient claims, citing a chain of treaties from centuries past. A crisp tension floated through the conversation, for both sides recognized the critical nature of each concession. All the while, Seraya cast her mesmerizing aura over the station. Scientists monitoring the environment near her seat observed a distinct shift in chemical composition, trace pheromones carried by the princess's breath. They noted how the station's ventilation system struggled to filter them out entirely. Some of Hale's junior staff, seated at a distance, grew visibly flushed. A young diplomatic aide, perhaps unseasoned in the mental exercises required for such negotiations, began to fidget and blush, his pupils dilating. But for Hale, the effect was akin to a soft breeze that brushed by without lingering. He felt the subtle stirring in the air, but it passed him by as though he existed behind an impenetrable glass. That evening, once the formal session had ended in a temporary adjournment, the princess was escorted to her luxurious accommodations within Nexus Station's diplomatic wing. Hale retreated to his own quarters, exhaustion pulling at him like a gravitational tide. The corridor lights dimmed in a cycle simulating nighttime, but he still felt the tension twisting in his mind. How to appease the Imeri's demands without sacrificing humanity's rightful expansion. His quarters were modest by comparison to the Imeri suite, but comfortable enough. They consisted of a sleeping alcove, a small living area, and a window that overlooked the docking ring. Outside, he could see the distant glimmer of Seraya's vessel, and he wondered what measures the Imeri might take should these talks fail. At the same time, across the station, Seraya paced the length of her chambers, contemplating the puzzle that was Ryan Hale. She could almost see the swirling patterns of her own pheromones drifting about her, Yet they did not encase the commander's mind in the haze they cast upon so many others. Intrigue tugged at her, for never had she experienced such a complete immunity. He was different from the rest, not because he was human. She had met humans before, some faintly influenced by her aura, though to a lesser degree, but because something in the core of his being refused to yield. She thought back to how he had spoken. His voice was steady, firm, yet not challenging. A quiet warmth underpinned his formality. That spark of sincerity, so unaffected by her presence, both unsettled and enthralled her. For her entire life, Seraya had seen others fall under her sway, some quickly, some slowly, but all with an air of inevitability. Now, confronted with an unmovable will, she felt an unfamiliar sensation rising within her, curiosity that bordered on fascination. Late that night, Hale found sleep elusive. Instead, he sank into the quiet hush of his living area, reviewing the day's negotiations on his datapad. The starlight outside flickered against the station's hull. His mind wandered to the curve of Seraya's features, the subtle glow of her skin, and the resonant tone of her voice. He would never allow himself to be seduced by her manipulations, yet he admitted to a certain admiration for her refined manner, her regal bearing. The next morning came swiftly, station lights brightening to simulate dawn. The corridors filled once again with staff and security, though the tension from the previous day still lingered. In the main conference hall, the second session of negotiations began. Both sides exchanged further details about planetary surveys and potential compromise. The methodical back and forth lulled some into a rote participation, but beneath the routine, a more profound dance was unfolding between Princess Seraya and Commander Hale. Every time her gaze fixed on him, a small frown would cross her face. It was subtle, but it betrayed her perplexed irritation that the tide of her pheromones did not wash over him. At intervals, she increased the exhalations, a near imperceptible intensification of her presence. But still, it was as if he were shielded by an unseen barrier. Nonetheless, the negotiations progressed. Hale remained methodical, unwavering in his position that any compromise must respect Earth's existing colonies while acknowledging historic Imeri claims. He was prepared to offer resource-sharing agreements, mutual defense pacts, and scientific collaborations that would ensure both peoples benefited in the changing interstellar landscape. As the second day stretched on, Seraya abruptly dismissed her advisors and Hale's staff from the chamber, claiming she wished to speak with the commander privately. A ripple of concern passed through those present, but her request was couched in the language of diplomacy, an opportunity to expedite certain matters away from the posturing eyes of subordinates. Hale inclined his head in cautious agreement. He had always known she might attempt a more direct test of her powers, but he trusted his immunity would hold firm. With the others gone, the chamber felt larger, emptier, and the faint hum of the station's life support systems became more noticeable. "Commander," Seraya began, her voice carrying an undercurrent of restrained intensity. "I must confess, I find this situation unprecedented. The Imeri have always prided themselves on a particular advantage, especially within the royal line. Our pheromones grant us persuasive influence that has shaped diplomatic relations for centuries. Yet you stand as though you are carved from the station's steel." Hale crossed his arms slowly, not in aggression, but to steady himself. "I understand that this is an unusual circumstance for you, Princess, but it is my duty to represent humanity's interests without compromise. My immunity simply allows me to fulfill that duty more effectively." She paced in a small circle, her gown trailing in whisper-soft folds. "Is it a matter of conscious resistance? Are you using some trained technique? Or is it inherent, purely biological?" He hesitated, unsure how best to explain a trait that no human truly understood. "We've studied it for decades, from the first contact with Imeri. The leading theory suggests that the particular molecular structure of your pheromones cannot bind to certain proteins in our biology. It's less about willpower and more about biochemistry. Even so, some humans are more susceptible than others, as you might have noticed with some of my aides." "Yes," she said quietly. "But you, specifically, are entirely unyielding. There's something different in you, an unwavering sense of self. It's more than mere chemistry. I can sense it." Her words hung in the air, carrying a curious weight. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she offered a tentative smile, though it lacked the arrogance she might have displayed before. For years, all who approached me fell under my thrall, she continued. Kings, queens, ambassadors, entire fleets. At first, I reveled in my power, believing it confirmed my destiny to unite the galaxy under a merry wisdom. But it eroded the sincerity of every encounter. Over time, I realized I could no longer be sure who was genuine and who was merely enthralled. It became a lonely existence, Commander Hale. Her confession surprised him. He had not expected vulnerability from one so revered, so accustomed to adulation. Slowly, he lowered his arms, letting them rest at his sides. I can only imagine the isolation, he replied softly. Perhaps it's why these negotiations are important. Our peoples don't need to be controlled or enthralled to find common ground. If we work together freely, we might discover a shared future that's built on respect, not compulsion. A wry smile curved across her lips. Your words are noble. But from the Emeri perspective, the power we wield is a natural right, something that has guided our empire for centuries. If we forfeit that advantage, some may see it as weakness. He met her gaze, unwavering. Strength can appear in unexpected forms. Sometimes, the greatest power is choosing not to exert it, allowing people to stand as equals. If you and your father can see beyond the tradition of pheromonal dominance, you may find respect that runs deeper than anything forced upon others. She turned away for a moment, considering. Her posture remained regal, but a quiet introspection softened her features. I need time to think, Commander. Perhaps we should adjourn for the day. Hale agreed, feeling that the conversation had reached a turning point. Something told him that she had begun to see a different path, though whether she would follow it remained uncertain. That evening, as the station's lights dimmed into the simulated dusk, Seraya stood at the panoramic window of her quarters, staring out at the boundless stars. The swirling cosmic tapestry reminded her of the Emeri homeworld, with its lavender skies and two pale moons. She remembered how, as a child, she had stood on a palace balcony, seeing courtiers bow low before her. Even then, she sensed their reverence was not wholly sincere, that their adulation stemmed from a power she did not understand. Now, she had encountered a man who was immune, and it had shaken her worldview in ways she could hardly articulate. She closed her eyes, exhaled gently, allowing her pheromones to rise into the air. In the past, she had drawn comfort from the knowledge that her will could shape the hearts of those around her. But in the quiet hush of that moment, she felt only isolation. For if manipulation was all she had known, how could she discern genuine loyalty or affection? In a moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability, she sank onto a nearby divan, pressing her palms together as if in prayer. She thought of Commander Hale's stoic face, his unwavering resolve, and how he spoke of forging alliances through respect rather than submission. Could such a bond truly exist between the Emeri and humanity? The next day, negotiations continued, albeit with a different energy. Hale noticed that Seraya seemed distant, almost subdued. She spoke less, allowing her advisors to handle the bulk of the discussion. Yet, behind her eyes, he glimpsed a roiling contemplation. Something fundamental had changed within her. The demands the Emeri made that day were softer, with fewer absolutes. A new willingness to compromise had begun to take shape. Over the following weeks, the station bustled with behind-the-scenes activity. The Emeri delegation and Earth's diplomatic corps refined the language of potential treaties, hammered out resource-sharing proposals, and even discussed establishing a joint research facility in neutral territory. Each day, Seraya and Hale shared polite greetings, continuing a private dialogue in fleeting moments, a delicate undercurrent that neither side's staff fully grasped. During those snatched moments, the two spoke of their homeworlds. Hale described Earth's seas, the azure depths filled with life, and the proud cities that spanned continents. Seraya recounted the rose-colored forest of Emeri Prime, where translucent vines dripped luminescent pollen. She spoke of her father, King Eridan, a monarch devoted to expanding Emeri influence to unite all species under a single banner. Hale shared stories of his service in the Planetary Council, how he had witnessed both the triumphs and mistakes of humanity's outward push into the galaxy. Their words flowed easier with each exchange, colored not by the pungent haze of pheromonal compulsion, but by a growing mutual respect. Seraya had never known such a connection. She found herself confiding in Hale, at times inadvertently, about her fears and hopes. He listened patiently, offering only honest insight rather than shallow flattery. All the while, the official negotiations approached a crescendo. Both sides aimed to finalize an accord that would grant Earth-limited colonization rights to Orandon and Nessalia, while ensuring a substantial stake for the Ameri in resource distribution. Helira, the most sacred of the disputed planets, would become a protected site under joint stewardship, allowing carefully regulated settlement without desecrating ancient Ameri shrines. Such an arrangement, if approved by King Eridan, would mark the first genuine partnership between humans and Ameri, transcending the older cycle of enthrallment and silent resentment. But not everyone on either side welcomed this emerging alignment. Within the Ameri delegation, a faction of Seraya's advisors remained distrustful, believing the humans' immunity threatened the Ameri's rightful dominance. They whispered in hushed tones that the princess had been swayed too easily by Hale's sincerity, that she was abandoning centuries of tradition. Among humans, there were murmurs of doubt as well, that the Ameri might be weaving a subtler trap. Such tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to erupt if the final agreement fell short of expectations. One night, as the swirl of station activity quieted, Seraya received an urgent communication from Ameri Prime. Her father's stern visage, projected above a sleek hollow table, filled her with a pang of apprehension. King Eridan's features were gaunt, yet noble, his silvered hair braided with amethyst ornaments. His voice was deep, resonating with the authority of an empire. "Seraya, my daughter," he began, "I have reviewed your latest dispatches regarding the treaty. Our people grow restless with these prolonged talks. Many expected you to secure a swift resolution, leveraging the Ameri birthright that flows in your veins. Yet, it seems you have spent more time conversing with the humans than enthralling them." She bristled. "Father, enthrallment was always an option, but it would have accomplished nothing lasting with the humans. Their resistance is formidable, and employing brute force would only breed long-term conflict. This arrangement, if signed, will permit us stable access to resources while avoiding a costly war." War. The king's eyes narrowed. "You believe it would come to that?" She inhaled, steadying herself. "I do. The humans are innovative and far more resilient than we have imagined. Their immunity to our pheromones is not a trifling detail. If we antagonize them, we risk a war that could last generations." A tense silence followed, the flickering hollow light casting shadows on the chamber's walls. Then King Eridan let out a low, measured sigh. "I have come to trust your judgment, Seraya, though I wish you had employed our gifts more effectively. You will finalize these negotiations soon, or we will send another delegate to impose a stricter approach." She bowed her head. "I understand, Father. I won't fail you." When the connection terminated, Seraya felt a tremor in her chest. She knew her time was running short. If she could not finalize the deal under mutually respectful terms, the Ameri would escalate, possibly returning to the cycle of subjugation they had always relied upon. And she, who had tasted a new possibility, could no longer bear that path. Early the next morning, she sought out Hale in a private observation lounge near the station's upper ring. The lounge was rarely used, situated near the docking platforms that handled only small courier vessels. Wide windows revealed a breathtaking vista of space, punctuated by the swirling luminescence of a distant nebula. When she arrived, he stood gazing out, lost in reflection. "Commander Hale," she said softly, stepping closer. "I must speak with you in confidence." He turned, offering a polite smile tinged with concern. "Princess Seraya, of course. Is something the matter?" She glanced at the solitary star's cape, her voice hushed. "Time grows short. My father grows impatient. I fear if we don't seal this agreement soon, he will send an enforcer to force compliance. The delicate progress we've made would shatter." Hale's gaze hardened. "I suspected the Ameri might be divided in their stance. I'm sure my own superiors wonder why it's taking so long. But forging a genuine alliance is never swift." She drew a breath, pressing her slender fingers together. "Commander, I have no desire to see these talks end in bloodshed or further enslavement. Our people have used their pheromonal gifts for generations, but I no longer believe it is the way forward. Not against you, not against anyone who yearns to stand on equal ground. I've discovered something during these negotiations, something about trust and choice that I never realized I needed." He inclined his head, silently urging her to go on. "Your resistance, your sincerity, it forced me to confront the reality that the illusions of devotion I've always received were hollow. But you have shown me what honest connection could look like. If we succeed in finalizing this treaty based on real cooperation, we might carve a new path for both our species." Hale exhaled, relief and a cautious optimism mingling in his face. I share that hope. If we can find an agreement that respects your father's claims while safeguarding our colonies, it may become a cornerstone for future alliances throughout the galaxy. They spent that morning deep in conversation, refining the terms that had yet to be settled: transit rights, environmental protections, cultural exchanges. Each clause was carefully weighed, ensuring neither side felt exploited. And with each hour that passed, they sensed the forging of a nascent bond, one that transcended political necessity. By midday, they rejoined the official delegations in the Grand Atrium. The atmosphere was electric. Advisors from both sides whispered anxiously, each suspecting that something decisive was underway. Seraya presented a revised set of terms, surprising her own advisors with how balanced they seemed. On the human side, Hale outlined Earth's acceptance of the Imeri's historical ties, with provisions to compensate for resource exploitation on the contested planets. The delegates volleyed back and forth, amending and clarifying. An undercurrent of tension built steadily, like a gravitational field about to snap. Finally, after many hours, the text of the treaty hovered above the central table, displayed in glowing holoscript for all to read. Seraya stood, regal in her bearing, though a hint of subdued vulnerability lingered in her voice. In the name of Emeri Prime, under the authority vested in me by King Eridan, I confirm these terms of cooperation with the Planetary Council of Earth. May it herald a new era of prosperity. Hale faced her, bowing his head respectfully. On behalf of Earth, I affirm our commitment to honoring the Emeri's heritage and collaborating to build a future grounded in mutual respect. Let our peoples usher in a peace that stands not on compulsion, but on choice. The station staff erupted in applause, though some on each side clapped grudgingly, uncertain of what the future might hold. The official recorders affixed seals to the digital documents, sending encrypted confirmations across subspace channels. A new chapter of interstellar relations had just been written. Soon after, Seraya extended an invitation to a small reception in her private quarters to commemorate the signing. Hale accepted, partly from diplomatic courtesy, partly from genuine curiosity. In the hushed atmosphere of her chambers, they shared a ceremonial cup of spiced nectar, a rare delicacy from Emeri Prime. It tasted sweet, yet carried an exotic sting, reminiscent of the complexities that defined their two worlds. "Commander," she said softly, after the initial pleasantries, "you have shown me that strength can manifest without subjugation. I only hope that my father, and the people of Emeri, will come to understand that as well." Hale offered a reassuring smile. With the treaty in place, they will see the benefits soon enough. They'll see the sincerity of our cooperation. She set down her cup, gazing at him with an intensity that shimmered in the subdued light. "I must return to Emeri Prime soon to ensure my father ratifies this treaty. He remains cautious, though I believe he trusts me enough to recognize this is the best path. But, once that is done, I hope we might find reason to meet again, not as adversaries or forced allies, but as friends." Her words were light, but he sensed a deeper meaning beneath them. "I would like that, Princess. I believe we've just begun to discover what our peoples can accomplish together." A gentle hush enveloped them. No pheromone-laced thrall, no manipulative undercurrent. Simply the possibility of an uncharted connection, one grounded in respect and tempered by empathy. In that moment, she reached out, placing a slender hand against his. He did not flinch. Instead, he welcomed the warmth of her touch, aware that it signaled a new dimension of their relationship. Over the next few days, final preparations were made for the Emeri vessel's departure. Nexus Station's corridors bustled with activity, as cargo and staff returned to the teardrop-shaped ship. Documents were sealed, schedules set, and both delegations prepared to return to their respective homes. Princess Seraya stood before Hale on the docking platform one last time, the swirl of her silken robe rippling in the station's artificial breeze. She regarded him with a fondness that she tried not to overstate, mindful of her entourage watching closely. "Until we meet again, Commander Ryan Hale. May the stars guide us to a future unburdened by illusions." He bowed, a subtle smile curving his lips. "Safe journey, Your Highness. I'll await news of your success back on Emeri Prime." With that, she and her retinue boarded their vessel. As the sleek craft disengaged from the docking clamps and drifted away from Nexus Station, Hale felt an inexplicable mixture of relief, triumph, and a quiet pang of longing. In her absence, the station felt oddly still, as though the swirl of her presence had left a subtle imprint on the air. But he also sensed something new blossoming, a genuine alliance, and perhaps the spark of a personal bond that might grow with time. Back on Earth, news of the treaty's signing was met with cautious celebration. Some political factions questioned the logic of trusting an empire built on biochemical enthrallment, but Hale's supporters insisted that the unique nature of humanity's resistance, combined with Seraya's willingness to negotiate, offered a rare chance for lasting peace. Analysts pored over the documents, praising the balanced nature of resource sharing and joint governance on the disputed planets. The interstellar community watched carefully, for the Imeri had been a power player in the galaxy for centuries, rarely bending to another race's demands. In the weeks that followed, as Seraya returned to her homeworld, she navigated a complex web of Imeri court politics. King Eridan received her with restrained warmth, questioning her at length about the humans' sincerity and the potency of their immunity. Advisors, skeptical and proud, attempted to undermine her achievements, claiming she had been bewitched by the humans, ironically reversing the notion of who held the power. Yet Seraya stood firm, presenting clear data on resource yields, stability projections, and the rising threat of external species who might take advantage if the Imeri clung to an outdated model of dominance. Gradually, King Eridan's doubts softened. He still eyed the treaty with caution, but Seraya's logic, and perhaps her earnest conviction, convinced him to offer official approval. The Imeri populace, initially uneasy about forging an alliance with a species they could not enthrall, soon saw the economic and cultural benefits. Trade ships began to traverse the once restricted sectors, carrying new goods and technologies. Human scientists established a preliminary outpost on Helira, working side by side with Imeri scholars to preserve ancient shrines, while also studying the planet's rare biodiversity. Months slipped by like stardust drifting through the cosmos. Commander Hale continued his diplomatic work, guiding joint missions and occasionally traveling to Earth's frontier colonies. Each day, he received updates about the budding cooperation with the Imeri. Joint exploration teams cataloged new flora on Nessalia, discovered advanced ore on Arandon, and set up cultural exchange programs in orbiting space stations. During this time, occasional messages came from Princess Seraya, delivered through secure channels. Their tone was both formal and personal, bridging the gap between official reports and private confession. She spoke of the challenges she faced, of her father's lingering wariness, and the slow process of shifting an empire's perspective. Hale replied with encouragement, sharing Earth's progress and reaffirming the partnership they had forged. At last, an invitation arrived for Hale to visit Imeri Prime, not merely as a delegate, but as a guest of the royal court. The Imeri would hold a grand ceremony to commemorate the successful activation of the Joint Resource Facility, and the event would coincide with one of their planet's renowned festivals. When Hale read the invitation, he felt an uncharacteristic thrill of anticipation, tempered by the weight of traveling alone into the heart of an empire historically reliant on enthrallment. He accepted without hesitation. Arrangements were made swiftly, and soon he found himself aboard a sleek Earth ambassadorial shuttle, crossing the starlit expanse toward Imeri Prime. As he neared the planet, he beheld its majesty, swirling pinkish atmospheres, glittering seas that reflected the glow of the twin moons, and vast continents linked by archipelagos. Upon landing at the royal spaceport, he was greeted by an honor guard of Imeri soldiers dressed in ceremonial robes of deep violet, their eyes watchful but not hostile. Beyond them waited a hovering platform, adorned with banners etched in silver filigree, depicting the royal emblem, a stylized set of fractal wings. Commander Hale stepped onto the platform, letting the warm, softly scented breeze wash over him. The sky was tinted a soft lavender, and the distant horizon glowed with faint golden light. As the platform glided toward the palace complex, Hale observed the surrounding cityscape, tall spires of white stone and purple glass, wide boulevards lined with slender, bioluminescent trees, and bustling crowds that craned their necks for a glimpse of the human visitor. This was a world shaped by centuries of Imeri dominance, an empire whose arts and architecture reflected grace and refinement. At the heart of the city rose the palace, an ornate structure of spiraling towers connected by sweeping bridges. Bright energy fields crackled around the perimeter, forming protective barriers. When the platform touched down in a grand courtyard, Hale was welcomed by a gathering of high-ranking courtiers, each bowing in measured respect. At the forefront stood Princess Seraya, her regal robes woven with intricate designs that glowed faintly in the daylight. "Commander Hale," she said with genuine warmth, stepping forward. "Welcome to Ameri Prime." He inclined his head, a polite smile on his lips. "It's an honor to be here, Princess. Your city is breathtaking." She offered a hand. Hesitating only for a moment, he clasped it gently. To his relief, he sensed no wave of enthralling pheromones attempting to flood his senses. Only the quiet sincerity of someone who chose not to exert that power. Around them, courtiers watched carefully, some with open curiosity, others with barely concealed skepticism. Seraya led him into the palace's main hall, a sweeping corridor lined with towering sculptures of past Ameri monarchs. Stained glass panels filtered the lavender daylight into shimmering patterns that danced across the polished floor. The air was perfumed with the scent of blooming flowers from the palace's inner gardens. Members of the Ameri aristocracy inclined their heads, whispering greetings in hushed tones. Escorting him deeper, Seraya finally guided Hale to an expansive balcony overlooking the palace grounds. There, they could see the city's horizon, the gilded domes, and thousands of Ameri citizens gathering for the upcoming festival. Soft music drifted up from the streets, mingling with the gentle breeze. "I wanted to show you this view," Seraya said quietly, her voice tinged with emotion. "This is my home, and I've always wondered how it must seem to outsiders. Through these negotiations, I've realized that the barriers we erect, whether physical or biological, blind us to the potential of others." Hale leaned against the balcony's railing, taking in the city's beauty. "Your homeworld is remarkable, Princess, and I'm honored you'd share it with me like this. It shows a trust that goes beyond formal treaties." She inclined her head in acknowledgement, then turned to face him. "The ceremony tonight is meant to honor the success of the resource facility we've established with humanity, but it's also a symbolic step for my people. Many here still grapple with the notion that we no longer rely on enthralling to secure allegiance. They must see, with their own eyes, that cooperation can yield greater results than subjugation ever did." As twilight fell, the city lights began to shimmer. Hale prepared for the ceremony, outfitted in formal attire reminiscent of Earth's grand diplomatic traditions. He donned a tailored suit of dark fabric, with subtle metallic accents that reflected the city's glow. Accompanied by Seraya, he traveled to a grand amphitheater near the palace. Hundreds of Ameri nobles and dignitaries filled the seats, while floating hollow cameras documented every moment. King Aridin presided over the event from a raised dais, his presence commanding respect. When Hale and Seraya approached, the crowd grew hushed. The king rose, his expression stern but tinged with careful acceptance. "In times past," the king began, "the Ameri prided themselves on a birthright that granted us influence over those we encountered. Today, we acknowledge a new way, one that embraces mutual respect. Let all who bear witness understand that we do not forsake our heritage, but we choose to evolve. Through collaboration with humanity, guided by my daughter, Princess Seraya, and Commander Ryan Hale, we have secured a better future for both our peoples." A ripple of applause spread through the amphitheater. Hale bowed, his heart pounding with the gravity of the moment. Seraya stood beside him, poised and regal. The many in the crowd wore expressions of uncertain acceptance. The overall atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. After the formal speeches concluded, the amphitheater erupted in festivities. Musicians performed ancient Ameri compositions, their harmonies echoing under the lavender sky. Dancers twirled, adorned in glowing attire that left trails of soft light in the air. The aroma of spices and delicacies wafted through the crowd, drawing attendees to elaborate banquet tables. Hale found himself approached by numerous Ameri, some of whom asked thoughtful questions about Earth's culture, while others offered compliments in halting, newly learned English phrases. Their curiosity was genuine, and although the remnants of old suspicion lingered, an atmosphere of goodwill took root. Later in the evening, as the festivities reached a tranquil lull, Seraya led Hale away from the bustling crowd to a secluded terrace beyond the amphitheater. Overhead, the twin moons shone like polished pearls, bathing the world in silvery light. From their vantage point, they could see the city spread below them, a living tapestry of light and color. They leaned against the terrace railing, side by side, their conversation soft amidst the distant murmur of celebration. Seraya's eyes glimmered with an emotion that transcended mere political alliance. You know, she began quietly, I could never have imagined any of this when I first arrived on Nexus Station. I expected to bend humanity to my will, as we have done with countless species. Yet your immunity was more than biological. It was a testament to your inner strength, to your belief that compulsion has no place in partnership. Hale turned to her, the gentle moonlight accentuating the quiet sincerity in his voice. I believed there was a better way, but it was your choice, Princess, that made it real. You proved to your people, and to mine, that we're capable of forging alliances without domination. You stood at the crossroads and chose a path that offers genuine respect. She reached out, her hand trembling ever so slightly, as she placed it atop his. In that moment, there was no swirling haze of pheromones, no hidden compulsion behind her actions, only the simple truth of two individuals who had bridged an unimaginable gap. Ryan, she whispered, her formal tone falling away. I owe you more than you know. You showed me that trust is the only power worth having. The days ahead may still be challenging, but at least I know there's someone in the stars who sees me as I truly am, not a mesmerizing princess of an ancient empire, but a woman seeking her own path. He laced his fingers with hers, letting the warmth of her touch ground him in the present moment. Far below, the city sparkled, a testament to the empire that had, for centuries, relied on enthrallment for unity. Now, under the gentle glow of twin moons, an alien princess and a human commander stood on a terrace, forging a bond that might reshape history. Seraya, he murmured. Softly, the trust goes both ways. Whatever trials await us, we'll face them as equals. She smiled, a tender, luminous expression that spoke of possibility. Around them, the gentle breeze carried the echoes of music and laughter, a fitting backdrop for a new era of hope. The shadow of enthrallment that once darkened the Ameri's legacy receded, replaced by the real promise of cooperation. And so, in the heart of an empire built on ancient power, amidst moonlit towers and violet skies, a joyful ending took shape, one in which manipulative pheromones gave way to sincere respect. And a solitary human steadfast will birth an alliance that might echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Together, they gazed into the endless night, secure in the knowledge that they had chosen a path defined by understanding, and sealed by a bond that transcended both species and stars.